D.B. Cooper, The Man Who Vanished into the Night. A documentary script. Target duration, 22 to 25 minutes. Word count, 800 words. November 24, 1971. The night before Thanksgiving. A man in a dark suit walks into Portland International Airport. He buys a one-way ticket to Seattle for $20. He gives his name as Dan Cooper. He boards Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305. 18 minutes later, he passes a note to the flight attendant. It reads, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me." What happened next would become the most mysterious crime in American aviation history. A man jumped from a plane with $200,000 and was never seen again. This is the story of D.B. Cooper. The man who called himself Dan Cooper arrived at Portland International Airport on the afternoon of November 24, 1971. He was described as Caucasian, approximately 45 years old, between 5 feet 10 and 6 feet tall. He wore a black suit, a white shirt, a black tie with a mother-of-pearl tie clip, and a dark raincoat. He carried a brown briefcase and appeared calm, composed, and entirely unremarkable. He approached the ticket counter and purchased a one-way ticket on Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, bound for Seattle, Washington. The flight was scheduled to depart at 2:50 p.m. The ticket cost exactly $20. Cooper paid in cash. No one knows where Dan Cooper came from that day. No one knows where he went afterward. But in the hours that followed, he would commit a crime that would captivate America for over 5 decades. Flight 305 was a short regional flight, typically lasting about 30 minutes. The aircraft was a Boeing 727-100, a 3-engine jet with a distinctive T-tail and rear-mounted engines. This particular aircraft had a feature that would prove crucial to Cooper's plan: a rear air stair, a deployable staircase built into the belly of the plane that could be lowered while in flight. Cooper boarded the aircraft and took seat 18C in the rear of the cabin. He ordered a bourbon and soda. He lit a cigarette. He seemed like any other business traveler heading home for the holiday. But Dan Cooper was not a business traveler. And he had no intention of reaching Seattle. At approximately 3 p.m., 18 minutes after takeoff, Cooper handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. She initially assumed it was his phone number, the kind of thing passengers sometimes slip to attractive crew members. She tucked it in her pocket without reading it. Cooper leaned forward. His voice was calm but commanding. "Miss, you'd better look at that note," he said. "I have a bomb." Schaffner opened the folded paper. The message was brief and terrifying: "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me." She did as instructed. Cooper opened his briefcase slightly, revealing what appeared to be a bomb, several red cylinders connected by wires to a large battery. Whether it was real or an elaborate prop remains unknown to this day. Cooper then made his demands. He wanted $200,000 in United States currency. All bills were to be in denominations of $20. He also requested 4 parachutes, 2 main parachutes and 2 reserve parachutes. He instructed Schaffner to convey these demands to the cockpit. The captain, William Scott, contacted air traffic control. The message was relayed to Northwest Orient's president, who authorized full cooperation. The FBI was notified. In Seattle, agents scrambled to assemble the ransom money and locate appropriate parachutes. Flight 305 circled over Puget Sound, a holding pattern designed to buy time. Cooper remained calm throughout. He ordered another bourbon, this time asking for the bottle. He chatted briefly with the flight attendants. He seemed to know what he was doing. He seemed to have done this before, or at least to have planned it meticulously. At 5:24 p.m., after nearly 2.5 hours in the air, Flight 305 touched down at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. The aircraft taxied to a remote section of the tarmac. Away from the terminal, away from other aircraft. The runway lights cast long shadows across the wet pavement. FBI agents had assembled the ransom money, $200,000 in $20 bills, all bearing the serial numbers L127437A through L261477A. Every bill was photographed before being handed over. The FBI hoped this would help them track the money after the hijacking, to identify whoever spent it. The parachutes were obtained from a local skydiving school. There were 2 military-issue main parachutes and 2 reserve parachutes. One of the reserve parachutes was a training model, sewn shut and non-functional. Cooper would not discover this until later, if he ever discovered it at all. The exchange was made. A flight attendant delivered the money and parachutes to Cooper at the rear of the aircraft. In return, Cooper released the 36 passengers and 1 flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, who had chosen to remain with the crew during the hijacking. The remaining crew, Captain Scott, First Officer Bob Radazak, Flight Engineer Harold Anderson, and Flight Attendant Mucklow, stayed aboard as Cooper had demanded. Cooper then issued his final instructions. He wanted the aircraft to fly toward Mexico City at a specific speed and altitude. He requested the landing gear remain down and the wing flaps extended to 15 degrees. He specifically asked for the cabin to remain unpressurized. These requests revealed something important: Cooper understood aviation. He knew that an unpressurized cabin would prevent the crew from being overcome by altitude sickness if the rear air stair was opened. He knew the combination of landing gear and flaps would keep the aircraft stable at lower speeds. He was not an amateur. At approximately 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 took off from Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, heading south toward Mexico. But Cooper had no intention of reaching Mexico City. He had a different destination in mind. 20 minutes after takeoff, a warning light illuminated in the cockpit. The rear air stair had been deployed. Cooper had opened the door at the back of the aircraft and lowered the stairs into the wind. The aircraft was flying over southwest Washington, somewhere between Seattle and Portland. The altitude was approximately 10,000 feet. The air temperature outside was 7 degrees below zero. The wind howled through the open door at nearly 200 miles per hour. What happened next remains one of the greatest mysteries in American history. Cooper strapped on the parachutes. He secured the bag containing $200,000 to his body. He positioned himself at the open door, staring into the darkness below. And then he jumped. No one saw him leave. The crew was in the cockpit, separated from the cabin by a locked door. They had been instructed not to interfere. When Captain Scott felt the pressure change and saw the air stair warning light, he radioed air traffic control. "It looks like he's bailing out," he said. But by the time anyone could check, Dan Cooper was gone. He had vanished into the cold November night, somewhere over the forests and mountains of the Pacific Northwest. The aircraft continued toward Reno, Nevada, where it landed safely. FBI agents stormed the cabin. They found Cooper's tie, his tie clip, and 8 cigarette butts. They found the briefcase, which contained no bomb, only wires and batteries, a clever fake. They found the non-functional reserve parachute, left behind. They found no Dan Cooper. The largest manhunt in American history began the following morning. Over 400 FBI agents, military personnel, and local law enforcement officers descended on the area where Cooper was believed to have landed. Helicopters swept the forests. Search parties combed through thick underbrush. Dogs tracked scents through the muddy terrain. The search area covered over 400 square miles of rugged wilderness. The terrain was brutal: dense forests, steep ravines, freezing rivers. Winter was approaching. Temperatures dropped below freezing at night. If Cooper had survived the jump, he faced a desperate struggle to escape the wilderness. For 18 days, the search continued. They found nothing. No footprints, no parachute, no body, no trace of Dan Cooper. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. The FBI interviewed hundreds of witnesses. They analyzed the serial numbers of the ransom bills, hoping someone would try to spend them. They studied the cigarette butts for DNA evidence. They examined the tie for microscopic clues. From the tie, they recovered nearly 100 tiny particles, brass filings, aluminum shavings, and other industrial materials. Some analysts suggested these particles indicated Cooper worked in a manufacturing environment, perhaps in the aerospace industry or metalworking. But the lead was never definitively traced. The investigation continued for decades. It became the longest and most extensive investigation in FBI history. Thousands of suspects were interviewed. Hundreds of leads were pursued. And still, Dan Cooper remained a ghost. Over the years, dozens of theories have emerged about Cooper's identity and fate. Some believe he died in the jump, that the harsh conditions and rugged terrain were too much for even a skilled parachutist to survive. Others believe he landed safely and escaped, living out his life in anonymity, the $200,000 funding a quiet retirement somewhere far from the Pacific Northwest. Several individuals have been proposed as possible suspects. Kenneth Christensen, a former paratrooper and airline employee, was investigated after his death in 1994. His brother claimed Kenneth matched the description and had unexplained wealth. But DNA evidence did not conclusively link him to the case. Richard McCoy, another skilled parachutist, hijacked a plane in 1972 using methods remarkably similar to Cooper's. He was caught, convicted, and later killed in a prison escape attempt. But McCoy's physical description did not match witnesses' accounts, and he was with his family in Utah on the day of the Cooper hijacking. Robert Rackstraw, a former Army pilot with explosives training, was investigated in 2018. Some evidence suggested connections to the case, but the FBI never named him an official suspect. He died in 2019. Other theories are more exotic. Some believe Cooper was a military veteran with specialized training. Others suggest he was an airline employee who knew the Boeing 727's unique features. A few even argue he was a foreign agent, though no evidence supports this theory. The truth is, no one knows. Dan Cooper remains unidentified. His fate remains unknown. The mystery endures. In 1980, 8 years after the hijacking, a young boy named Brian Ingram was vacationing with his family on the banks of the Columbia River, near Vancouver, Washington. He was digging in the sand when he found 3 bundles of waterlogged $20 bills. The FBI analyzed the serial numbers. They matched the ransom money paid to Dan Cooper. In total, $5,880 was recovered, buried in the riverbank. The bills were deteriorated, suggesting they had been there for years. Some were still held together by rubber bands that had long since rotted away. The discovery raised more questions than it answered. Had Cooper lost the money during his descent? Had he buried it and never returned? Had the money somehow washed downstream from another location? The Columbia River find remains one of the most puzzling pieces of evidence in the case. The rest of the money, over $194,000, has never been found. No other bill from the ransom has ever entered circulation. Cooper either lost the money, hid it, or destroyed it. We simply do not know. In 2016, after 45 years of investigation, the FBI officially closed the case. They had exhausted all viable leads. They had spent thousands of hours and millions of dollars. They had come no closer to solving the mystery than they had been on that November night in 1971. The D.B. Cooper case remains the only unsolved commercial airline hijacking in American history. It has inspired books, documentaries, songs, and films. It has become part of American folklore, a story told around campfires and in bars, a mystery that refuses to be solved. Today, more than 50 years later, Dan Cooper remains a ghost. His true identity, his fate, and the location of the missing money are unknown. The tie he left behind is preserved in FBI evidence storage. The cigarette butts have been tested and retested for DNA. The serial numbers of the ransom bills remain in FBI databases, waiting for someone to spend one. The Boeing 727 that carried Flight 305 was eventually retired and scrapped. The air stair that Cooper opened no longer exists. The forests where he might have landed are still there, silent and vast, holding their secrets close. Every year, new theories emerge. New suspects are proposed. New investigations are launched by amateur sleuths and professional investigators alike. The case captivates us because it represents something profound, a man who took on the system and one, who vanished so completely that he became a legend. Was Dan Cooper a criminal genius who executed the perfect crime? Or was he a desperate man who gambled everything and lost, dying alone in a frozen forest somewhere in Washington state? Did he escape with the money and live in luxury for the rest of his days? Or did he perish in the jump, his body swallowed by the wilderness, his bones scattered by animals and time? We may never know the answer. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Some stories are better left as questions than as answers. Dan Cooper jumped into the night and disappeared. He left behind a tie, a few cigarette butts, and a mystery that has captivated the world for over half a century. He got away with it. Or he didn't. Either way, he became immortal. This has been the story of D.B. Cooper, the man who vanished into the night. Total word count, 800 words, estimated duration, 22 to 25 minutes, timeline cards needed, 7 to 8 key moments, stock footage categories, airplanes, airports, forests, money, 1970s aesthetic, FBI investigation, parachutes.